All right, very good morning, very good evening, everyone. Right, so good time to start. We already waited for 5 minutes. Okay, let's continue with the yesterday discussion. Uh, what all we covered, we'll just quickly glance it, and then we'll continue for the further discussion on the continuation of yesterday's topic. Right, so we started with uh, the few things. We started with the introduction about myself. I've gone through that my entire IT industry experience and areas of expertise, which all product I worked. Uh, because I'm your instructor, where I'll be covering this entire course. I gone through about uh, introduction about me, and then my expertise, and then my strongest areas of expertise, and which all industry sectors I worked so far in this IT experience. And then followed by we went ahead with the course curriculum. What's the course curriculum, course content, what is included and what is not included, and also there will be a couple of questions around that, and we discussed all of them in our yesterday session. Quickly take a look on that course curriculum once again. If you can go to my blog on the training section, if you go to RAC or directly go to this particular URL, that will take you to the course curriculum. We explained everything in our yesterday session. I'm not going to explain again. You just go over and have a look on this particular course content. Again, this particular course content is basically formed based upon my experience as a RAC expert or the RAC administrator. What all needed for day in and day out to support any client. If you're working as a RAC expert or the RAC DBA or the RAC database administrator, so what are the expected tasks and what you need to support in the clusterware in the RAC environment. So everything will be formed based upon the real-time expertise and based upon the client day in and day out, the activities, what are common tasks to be performed. That's a list of tasks what is mentioned over here, and the course curriculum will be formed based upon my experience, what is needed as a RAC DBA to support any of the client. Right. So just go over this one. I'm gonna provide the link in the chat here as well, and you can get it from my blog as well. Right. So that's a course curriculum what we discuss in details, and followed by the course timing, course duration, and fee structure. That's what we discussed. The the course duration and the course timing. So whatever yesterday 6th Jan and today 7th Jan, Saturday, Sunday, these are the two demo sessions. What we are covering it using this Zoom link. But coming to the actual course starting date is 13th Jan. Next Saturday we are starting the actual course. And the timing is going to be 8 AM IST to 12 PM IST of 4 hours. That will be 9:30 PM EST to 1:30 AM EST. 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday. Because this is a weekend batch, Saturday, Sunday only. Right? So 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday, and then the duration is going to be like 5 to 6 weekends. We'll be able to complete this entire course. And this is a paid training, and the course fees is 15,000 or 15K Indian rupees or 185 US dollar. And the course will be conducted online via Zoom link or the Teams or WebEx will be communicated uh, through all the registered student. Right, so the version will be covering in this course is 19C database version. And again, there's a couple of questions around this course duration of the recordings. So everyday sessions will be recorded and then uploaded to Google Drive. And once you register for the course, you'll be getting access on these recordings. including the previous batch recordings. As I said yesterday, you can watch the previous batch recordings well in advance so that you will be prepared by yourself during the live classes, and you can clarify or ask more questions and participate in the discussion. Right, so recordings including the current batch and the previous batch you will be getting, and also you'll be getting a course materials, course PPTs, and workbook, lab exercise, all the softwares. Everything will be available in the Google Drive. Right, so that is basically your Google Drive access. So and then we discussed yesterday on this access. So there's no restriction on that. These are like lifetime accessible. You can use it for lifetime. And then even there's no restriction. You can download it locally into your laptop, these contents. There's no restriction on that. And then followed by dedicated WhatsApp group. Each and every batch will be having a dedicated WhatsApp group. All will be part of the group, and you can ask any questions, queries, not necessarily for this particular course, any of your work related and work related issues, or working for any client and you're stuck with any issue, or you're getting some issue, you just take a screenshot and post it in our WhatsApp group, and anyone can answer you, anyone can unblock you from that issue, or even I'll connect with you one to one, and then I can unblock you from there, and then you can get going. Right. So this WhatsApp group again, lifetime support provided if the group is active and everyone are actively participating, and we'll be keeping it. Otherwise, we'll remove it. Right. So that is a WhatsApp group where you can make use of that for any clarification, questions, queries, and Google Drive for accessing all the course materials, course content, all of them. And then the course timing, course duration, weekend batch, 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday, and then it'll be for 5 to 6 weekends. And the fees is 15,000 Indian rupees or 185 US dollar. And the online classes with the 19C database version. Right. With that, again, we got couple of registration yesterday. Uh, the next question what we discussed yesterday is how you're gonna proceed for the payment. So for the payment uh, process, you can always reach out to me on my WhatsApp number or my email, or you can call me on my cell. I can guide you through that further payment process. There are multiple ways of payment process. Whichever you are comfortable, you can opt it. We'll connect with one to one for the payment process. And that's about the payment. And followed by the important thing what we discussed is who all can continue with, who all can proceed with this particular RAC course. What are the minimum requirement? So anyone can continue with this particular RAC course, whether the junior DBA or whether you are experienced person, doesn't matter. But what is minimum requirement is you should be knowing a basics of SQLs, a basics of a Linux commands, and basics of your database knowledge. Once you know these three criteria, you should be able to continue with this RAC course. If you don't know SQL, you don't know how to write SQL queries, select star from your VDL database, select star from any table. If you don't know what's the syntax, how it looks like, the RAC course is going to be difficult. And you don't know what is the basics of Linux like CD, cat, mkdir, and su. All those basic commands are pretty much needed. If you don't know, again, the RAC course is going to be very difficult. You'll not be able to catch up the things. And the basics of database knowledge is very mandatory. You should be already completed your database course, and you should be already know concept of your instance and database. You should know what is instance, what is database, what is data file, what is SP file, what is control file, what is P file. All these things you should be aware of that. If you don't know, again, this RAC course is going to be very difficult. Right. So those are the basic requirement, minimum requirement, mandatory requirement. You should be knowing it, and followed by the hardware requirement, because in order to do a lab setup, you should be able to meet this minimum requirement. Like you should have minimum 20 GB RAM and 150 GB SSD hard disk. If you have this minimum requirement, you should be able to install your rack setup by your own, because that's where we'll be covering in a first week of sessions. We'll be conducting about installation, how we can set up your two node rack setup from the scratch, understanding the Linux part, understanding the networking part, understanding the SAID group, ASM disk group, installing your clusterware ASM, installing your rack database. So in first week we'll be covering from the scratch until that entire rack setup. In order to do that, you should have minimum 20 GB RAM and 150 GB SSD hard disk. Then only the installation proceeds further. And yesterday there are a couple of questions around that. I don't have this much of RAM, and then if you don't have this much of RAM in your laptop or desktop, your installation will never proceed. So your installation will be stuck and your VMs will be very slow. So for that, you should have this much of minimum RAM and hard disk so that you can install your own rack setup using Oracle VirtualBox, because we'll be using individuals your own left laptop or desktop, whatever you are using it for this course, in order to do a lab setup, and then you can practice over there. Right. So that is for the installation. Again, at the same time, we also talked about the ready labs. Ready lab in the sense, so there are a couple of labs which are already available in our Google Drive. So you're gonna use those labs, and then you're gonna continue with using that lab. So again, that is whenever you have a limitation on your RAM and SSD, you can go and then use those ready labs. Those ready labs are like built in with various configuration. Like if I go to rack ready labs here, we have empty VMs here. We'll be using these empty VMs to set up a rack from the scratch. And apart from that, there are so many 12C, 19C, with ASM, without ASM, with Oracle user, with grid user, and with database, without database. There are so many labs are built in already set up over here. You just download it and then configure it. So that is when you have a limitation on your resource, you just use the ready labs. But if you don't have a limitation, you already meeting this uh, hardware condition or hardware requirement, then you can go out with your installation from the scratch along with me. All right, so that is what we discussed about this particular course in our yesterday session. Any questions here so far? Anyone has any questions so far on the course duration or fee structure or course timing?
From when will see the all the videos in the Google Drive?
When we will means like you are talking about the previous batch or the current
Yes,
batch?
previous batch.
The moment you make a registration, you'll be getting access on the all the previous batch recordings, course materials, course content, everything. But coming to the current batch, everyday sessions, whatever this weekend, we'll be covering that. The moment the class completes, on the same day will be uploaded into Google Drive. If somebody missed the session for today, you can pretty much go back and then watch the recordings.
So you already sent out in Google Drive, right? For the current batch also.
Correct. Yes, everything will be saved with
But
the
I'm not
registered
able
student.
to see through my mail ID in Google Drive.
Let's ping me in my WhatsApp. I'll check it out.
Sure.
I
Thank
already who are registered, they already might have got four links. One is for previous batch recordings, and one is for current batch recordings, and one is for
you. Yeah,
course materials.
oh, I have not get the access on that 4 links.
Right. When you registered?
Last week Saturday or Sunday, I think.
All right. Yeah, I'll connect with you. Probably I might have given. You can check your email or you can ping me on my WhatsApp. I'll take a look on
So,
that.
thank you.
So I am also facing the same.
All right. For Suresh, I know like yesterday I said the links, but I had to register. I had to grant access. I'll
Okay.
do it for today or after this class. But
Okay.
apart from you, most of them are already got access. Already taken care of that. But yeah, who are having some issue, just ping me. I'll take a look on that in my WhatsApp.
Yeah, Malik, one doubt actually.
Yeah, please go ahead.
See, to set up the virtual box you're talking about, at the if our computer at the BIOS level, do we need to make any configuration changes like enabling and disabling the
Right,
virtualization?
right,
Do we need to do that?
right. That's needed.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
All right.
because I thought like we'll go for Azure and get a Windows machine of 20 GB RAM, 150 GB SSD, and but only the Windows machine will be available, but not the BIOS, right, from Azure. Okay.
Yeah. So Azure again, you don't have an option to set up a rack in Azure. You don't have option to set up a rack in your.
But I
It is
think
not supported.
from
Your rack and your rack setup is not supported in AWS or Azure. You cannot do it.
yeah, but you can download the virtual box there into the Windows machine and try to set up there and try to.
Again, that will not work.
Yeah, okay, okay. I thought of doing like that, actually, but
Yeah.
okay, yeah, fine.
All right. Right. That's what we covered in yesterday's session about the course content, course curriculum, fee structure, and the course duration and the course timing. And then what are the mandatory or minimum requirement for this particular course? And then followed by what we
Quick question.
talked. Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, are we working on the Windows Linux or Unix
Linux. It's on Linux.
Linux?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that's one other questions repeatedly asked by many students. So we'll be covering only on the Linux platform and will not be covering anything on the Windows platform.
Okay. Only Linux, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Malik, one question like you said the minimum requirement for doing the lab configuration mesh system, it's 20 GB RAM, right?
Right.
One, you said like there is a ready lab is there in the drive. So how like we are going to use that? What is the minimum requirement if we are going to use that?
If you have a 16 GB RAM, then you can pretty much use those ready labs. So that
ready labs?
doesn't need, right? So if you are going with the installation by your own from the scratch, that needs minimum 20 GB. And with the 16 GB RAM, you can use the ready labs where it does not need any installation because already installation is done. But the caveat here is your VMs are a bit slow. Your VMs are a bit slow because of limitation on the RAM. So you have to work on that with little bit of slow. You have to have patience and then work or practice it. Otherwise, again, uh, the 20 GB RAM is fair enough. You do installation, you work, you access your VMs. That all looks like you're working on the real-time client environment. But with the 16 GB, you can use the ready labs. That also works because there's no need of any installation. Already labs are ready, but your VMs are a bit slow. So you have to work on that slowness.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Hi Malik.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, any restriction on CPU configuration? Yeah, and then i5, i7.
I don't think so. If you have i3 is very old one, nobody will be using it. If you have a i5 plus, then your setup should work. And then CPU doesn't matter, like as long as you have this requirement 20 GB RAM and then 15 GB, 150 GB SSD, then you can work. Because we are not dealing with a huge load or performance testing, just setup and configuration and then do a practice. So the CPU with the two CPU with the one single CPU doesn't matter, it should work. But yeah, i3 is a old generation. I don't think so. That's a old, very old laptop. or nobody will be using it, but i5 plus anything should work.
Or is there any weekdays classes apart from weekend?
No, it's only weekend because I'll be taking two courses. One is a DBA, that's a core DBA, and then other one is a RAC. So core DBA I'll be taking on my weekdays, and then the RAC will be taking on the weekends. Right. So
Okay,
that
what time is the DBA? You mean DBA administrator, right?
DBA, come again? What's your question?
DBA administrator, or
Yeah,
what do you say?
that's a DBA. Your database administrator, core DBA.
Okay, call DBA. Okay.
Yeah, that will be conducted in the weekdays, and then RAC will be on the weekend. These are the only two courses what I'm conducting as of now. All right. Any more questions, guys?
Yes. One question, last question from me.
Good.
There is the one upgradation sessions also, right? So from what
Yeah,
version to what version you are going to upgrade the system?
upgradations has many. If I can go here in the upgradation sections, we are not teaching what version to what version you are upgrading. What are the different ways to upgrade? There are totally 5 ways you can upgrade your database. One is your Perl script, shell script, your auto upgrade, your DBUA, and your manual upgrade. So for 19C, you want to upgrade your 19C from 11G, you can directly upgrade it to 19C. From 12.12C, you can directly upgrade it to 19C. And from 18C, you can directly upgrade it to 19C. There is no requirement. Even if you go with 11G to 19C, 12C to 19C, 18C to 19C upgradation, all are pretty much same. There's no changes at all.
So this will be live session for it, right? Upgradation steps by step, or
Not only upgradation, entire course is a live session, live demonstration. It will be a live practical example. Not
okay.
only upgradation, including patching, including installation, configuration of your ACFS, your multi-tenant architecture, everything will be live practical demonstrated on the lab. There's nothing called like just a PPT explaining and then closing it.
Okay.
So that means document will be provided, right?
That
That means document will be provided.
yes,
SOP.
document will be there. Entire document will be available in the single PPT here. If I just now I'll go with somebody asked for upgradation. I'll directly go to upgradation. Let's go to upgradation. Right, look, let's go here. Upgradation of your RAC database and what are the pre-checks? What are the post checks we'll be doing it? And then your 12C to 19C you want to upgrade. What are the steps are involved here? You just need to copy, paste the command. And then it is not just I'm explaining here with this document. I'll be just connecting to my lab. I'm just executing the command and then I'll be showing the live demonstration. So documents are all like self-explanatory. You have a lot of document attached to the same PPT. You just need to open the documents and do a practice. Like if I open this one after the upgradation, you want to do a time zone upgrade in the database. So everything will be like self-explanatory. You just need to prepare or read your own PPT here, whatever I'm sharing with you, along with all the document, whatever attached to this PPT. But what I'm covering is, I'm not just explaining the PPT. I'll just jump onto my lab. I'll practically show the demonstration, how it works. And then you can practice it based upon that.
Yeah, I mean, my main question is, how can we access to the document?
It'll all be in Google Drive. The moment,
Oh,
as I said,
I don't have access to the Google Drive.
you don't have access to,
Yeah, I don't. It didn't share the Google Drive with me.
right? No, almost said everyone who are registered for last 1 week, you check your email, whatever the email ID you provided. For that email ID, I already given access. Otherwise, you can ping me on my WhatsApp. I'll take a look on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll connect with you, Malik, post this call for doing the payment and all.
All right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. Any more
Excuse me,
questions?
Malik. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. Maybe my question will be out of this scope, but I would like to know when you will be giving, let's say, the performance tuning course again, because yesterday you said that you will be giving this course. I don't know if I got it right.
Right. That's correct. Like that was my next. As I said, I'm currently taking only 2 courses, and
Mhm.
probably if at all I start the new course, that will be a PT. Probably stay tuned. In another 1.5 months, I'll be starting this course.
Okay, 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 okay. Thank you very much.
Yep. All right. All right. Let's continue. If no questions around this one, around this course curriculum or the content or the course structure or the timings or the fees. Again, for the payment, feel free to reach out to me on my WhatsApp or my uh, Gmail ID, or you can call me. I can guide you through that process. Right. That's all what we discussed in yesterday's session. Just for quick glance, I just covered it again here. And along with that, we covered few topics in yesterday's demo session. One is a standalone versus rack, and in the standalone, what is different types of database in the standalone, and then in the rack, what are the different types of, like basically we covered in yesterday's topic. I'm talking about standalone versus rack, what we covered, and then different types of databases, what we covered. Right, different types of databases again. Standalone, in standalone we get a single instance, we call it as a single instance or a single node, and then Oracle restart. Right, we covered in the what's the standalone versus rack, what we covered in our yesterday session, and followed by different types of databases. Different types of databases. In standalone, we have 2 types of databases. In rack, we have 2 types of databases. That's the rack database, and then rack one node. Right, so these are the 4 types of, if somebody asked, or if you're working on any client, you might deal with any one of these 4 types of database. It may be Oracle restart, it may be single node. The difference between these two is here DB is on FS file system, your local file system, and in case of Oracle restart, your DB is on your ASM. That's the only difference between this single instance or the Oracle restart. And then
So quick
Oracle,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
ASM is referring to the grid, right? Oracle grid.
Yeah, Oracle grid. We call it as a ASM, we call it as a clusterware, we call it as a grid, all are one and same. We'll discuss in further why we call it as different names in our actual classes. Right. So these are the 4 types of databases, what we see it in the industry, and then if you're working for any client, you may deal with any one of these database. And then we discussed about advantages of rack. And very first thing is
I have
your
it all.
okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, in the RAC, one node database is there, right? So actually, yesterday you have given the naming convention like RAC INC1 something. So in the industry, how can we know we have the RAC one node database? For example, in the SMON, we can find out the standalone
No,
database of.
I showed you yesterday, right? If I go back my yesterday's notes here, this is my yesterday note, what we captured, right? If I can go to
Yes.
my yesterday note, you had to use this command. Okay, you have to run this command.
Yes, I can use.
strctl config database, your database name, that'll tell you what's the type of your database.
Okay.
It's a rack one node in the SSD config command. And the same command, if you run it for the RAC database, it says this is SSD config database name. The type, it says RAC.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. And then we talked about what are the advantages of RAC. That's load balancing is very first thing. And then your before load balancing, I say HA, high availability. If one node goes down, you have other nodes to sustain your incoming client request. The high availability is the first main advantages for RAC, and load balancing is the other advantages for the RAC. And again, we'll discuss more on this HA, high availability, and load balancing. Again, load balancing will be done with the help of your scan. Load balancing can be, again, we'll discuss more detail on this, what is scan, how it works. And then TFA, your transparent application failover. If one node goes down, you don't need to inform your client. The client connection is continue to work by routing his session to or his query to the other existing nodes. Right? Those are like simple understanding of RAC. If somebody asks like one of the common questions in the RAC, what are the advantages of RAC? Why RAC is needed? So these are the three basic answers: your high availability, load balancing, and transparent application failover. Right. So that is at high level what we covered yesterday. Now in standalone, like forget about RAC for a minute. For RAC, whether the database is RAC database or RAC one node, your database will be on ASM. Right, that will be on ASM. Now let's understand a little bit on ASM. What is ASM? Right, what is ASM? In simple word, in order to understand what is ASM, let's say go back to the in older days. Before understanding the ASM, let's go back to the older days. Older days, what we used to do, we used to have clusterware software, and we used to have ASM software. We used to have two softwares, your clusterware software and your ASM software, and then your DB software. We used to download three software and install them on our, like, I want to configure a 2-node rack setup here. I want to configure my node 1 and my node 2, and then I want to configure a 2-node rack setup. So for that, we used to go with a 3 software installation. Like we used to install our clusterware software under, let's go here, U01 app clusterware. We used to install our clusterware software over here. And then same thing, user and app, ASM, we used to install ASM software. Again, these are the software we used to download it from Oracle eDelivery or Oracle support. And once we download it, we are going to install it under these directories, clusterware, ASM, and then user on app, DB. Right? So what it used to do, the moment you install ASM software, and we used to get ASM disks over here, the ASM storage. The moment you install your ASM software, we used to get your ASM storage, like, plus data. Plus data is my ASM disk group, and plus Rico, and then plus FRA, whatever name you can provide. So with the help of your Linux, your virtual disks, or your SAN or NAS, you can have disk attached to this node 1 and node 2. The moment you install your ASM software, we used to create that ASM storage, plus data, plus Rico, plus FRA. And then we used to install this clusterware software, The moment we install this clusterware software, and this these two nodes become my cluster. Right? Again, in general terminology, cluster means the combination of servers makes your cluster. And then we used to install database software, and the moment we install database software, we can run my DB instance 1 here and DB instance 2 here. Right? So that's how we used to do it. Clusterware software, we are going to install it on node 1 and node 2, which will form my 2-node cluster. And we used to install ASM software. We used to get ASM storage, and also ASM instance will be get created. And also we used to install database software, and that will run my database instance on top of this cluster. So that was the tedious job. We used to do it way back in our 9i or like in our 10G. So now Oracle came up with a new concept. Why to install separate software, clusterware software and ASM software? Let's combine them. And then they combined and they provided a grid software. The grid software. So grid software is nothing but your clusterware software plus your ASM software. They combine together and then they given your grid software. Right now, what we're doing here, we are installing grid, and then we are installing DB software. Grid software, and then the DB software. We are doing only two software installation in order to do a 2-node rack setup. There's no clusterware or there's no ASM installation now because they combined it and then they given a grid and DB software. So what we'll do now, instead of clusterware and all, we'll just go with user on app grid, and then we'll go with this user on app DB. That's what happens here. The moment you install this grid software, what you're going to do? You're going to do the same thing. You're going to set up your ASM storage, and then you're going to set up your clusterware, and it's going to form 2-node cluster. And the moment your cluster is ready, we'll install the DB software. And the moment DB software is installed, we're going to create the database on top of that. And that was changes from the olden days to nowadays. Why grid? So if somebody asked what is clusterware software, again, in simple terminologies, that's the main core software which will form my cluster of multiple nodes, multiple servers. And if somebody says what is ASM software, ASM software is again software provided by Oracle, which will provide you ASM storage, where you can keep your database, your data files, your redo logs, control files, your archive logs, your backup pieces, your export dumps, everything you can keep it on ASM storage. It's a storage. Instead of your OS storage file system, we're using a Oracle provided storage. And combining that cluster and ASM software, Oracle has given a new software called grid software. If you install one software, that's enough, which will install both your ASM and clusterware. And then on top of that, your database. Your database will run always on top of your clusterware. Right, so that's a basic understanding of how you can differentiate between clusterware software, ASM software, grid software, and database software. And many people will say, nowadays, many people will say clusterware home, or many people will say ASM home. Many people will say your grid home. These all are one and same. Your clusterware home, ASM home, grid home, all are one and same. It's basically a grid software you downloaded and you install it. Right, in my lab here, quickly if I go CD U01 app 19C grid. So this is my actual standard naming convention in GI grid infrastructure. User on app 19C grid. So this is my standard grid software I installed over here. This is my grid software. And then on top of this grid software, we'll be running ASM instance and then plus ASM storage. Right? ASM instance and ASM storage. What will be running on this grid software? On top of that, we'll be having a DB software. So my DB software will be U01 app, Oracle, product 19C, DB home. So this is my DB software or the DB home. So on top of this DB home, we'll be running my DB instances. So nowadays, like only two softwares. There's no three software. We'll be installing it like older days. We'll install the grid software where my ASM will be running and my ASM storage will be running. And right now, just now, I talked about ASM storage. I not shown anything on the ASM instance here. Why ASM instance comes into picture here? Like we'll be running the moment you install your clusterware software or ASM software or grid software, which is gonna provide you ASM storage and also which will gonna provide you your ASM instance. Right? You'll be running your ASM instance 1 here and ASM instance 2 here. Why we need these ASM instances? My database residing under ASM storage and my cluster is already formed. My ASM storage is already formed. My database instance are running here. And then why the moment I install grid, it ideally is supposed to give me ASM storage. Why it is creating ASM instance? Like your ASM instance will act as a mediator between your database instance and the ASM storage. In order to your database to access your ASM storage, your ASM instance should be act as a mediator or the communication bridge between your database instance and your ASM storage. And then this ASM instance is pretty much mandatory in order to manage your storage. Like, if you install your grid software or cluster software or ASM software and ASM storage is formed, then who is going to manage that ASM storage? The ASM instance should be mandatory in order to connect your ASM storage to manage that storage. That's where we can see ASM instance will be get created when you install your ASM or clusterware software or grid home or ASM home. The moment you install that, you can expect two things: ASM instance and ASM storage. ASM instance to manage that ASM storage and ASM instance to provide a communication bridge between my database instance and that ASM storage. Because my database cannot understand ASM in storage. Only ASM instance can understand ASM storage, and only ASM instance can manage my ASM storage. And because of that ASM instance, my database can understand ASM storage, read, write, and do any transactions inside that storage. And that's a simple in layman term how you can understand this grid software and the database software. And if you're setting up of your lab or setting up of your cluster, make sure that we'll be installing a grid software, whether it's a 12C, 11G, 19C, doesn't matter. We're going to install one grid software, which will install ASM instance and which will install ASM storage. Right, let's quickly check for that. PS-AF grep SMON. I have so many database instances over here, and followed by I have this ASM instance. Right, so ASM instance is for managing that ASM storage, and to manage that your or the communication gap between your database instance and the storage. And then
Malik, excuse me. Yeah, what is grid infrastructure? Because we used to hear people talking about grid infrastructure, because you talk about
that's the grid software. Clusterware
okay.
home, ASM home, grid home, or you can call it as a grid infrastructure.
Okay.
All are one.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Great. We
Hello,
have
sir,
this
I have one
ASM
doubt.
instance. Yeah, go ahead.
On which home cluster instance is started? GI home or database home? I think it's GI home, na?
GI home, your ASM instance, your ASM storage, or your cluster. For this GI home, you can call it as a clusterware home, ASM home, grid home, or grid infrastructure. Everything will be on your GI. Database is only for database instances.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Right. So now, again, as I said, we have right now node 1 and we have this node 2. So in this node 1, we install this grid software. And then in node 2, we install the same grid software. And the moment I install this grid software, what I'm going to get? I'm going to get a plus ASM1 here. And then I'm going to get a plus ASM2 here. On node 1, I'll get ASM1. On node 2, I'll get ASM2. And then will be ASM storage. So this ASM storage is a common. So remember this one. So there's no separate ASM storage between for node 1 and for node 2. You have to understand in this picture view, node 1 and node 2. On node 1, I install this software. On node 2, I install this grid software or the ASM software or the clusterware software or ASM home or grid home. All are same here. We install this software, It created my ASM instance 1 here, ASM instance 2 here, but my underlying ASM storage is remain same. Right, I'll be getting one ASM storage, which is common between node 1 and node 2. Right, for example, here node 1, I'll connect to my Oracle user, that's a grid user, and I'll set the environment to plus ASM1, and I'll connect to SQL plus /s sys ASM. I have connected to my ASM instance 1. Select instance underscore name from $, instance. So which will connect to my instance 1. So if I go to a second node, I can log into your Oracle user and run your plus ASM2 SQL plus /s sys ASM and run the same command. Select instance name from $, instance. I'll get my instance 2. So I have two instances running on node 1 and node 2. And now that is about ASM instance. You can connect your ASM instance and you can manage that ASM instance. In order to connect to ASM instance, you are going to run SQL plus as sys ASM and to administrate or manage that ASM instance. And in order to connect to your ASM storage, so as I said, ASM storage is a common between node 1 and node 2. It's a common shared storage. So you can connect from node 1 by running or node 2 or node 1 by just running ASM cmd-p. The moment I do ASM cmd-p, that's going to take you to ASM command line. Just do lsdg. lsdg stands for list disk group. It says I have data disk group, I have record disk group. That is on node 2. I have connected to node 2 running ASM cmd-p. If I can go to node 1, if I run the same command, ASM cmd-p, again that's going to take you to the same ASM command prompt. If I do lsdg, again I'll get the same thing, data and record, because your ASM instance and your ASM software installed on individually on node 1 and node 2. But the moment you install it, you're going to create a common shared storage on both the nodes. You can either access the storage from node 1 or you can access the storage from node 2. Right. That is your how you can install it, and then how you can get your ASM instance and ASM storage. Once this is done, this is like your install, you can say GI. You can, again, I'm just calling it as a GI. You can call it as a clusterware home, ASM home, grid home, all are one and same. Right, so this is what we did. Now, what we'll do, after that, install DB home. We'll be installing the DB home. This is my DB home. Install your DB home. Again, let's put it over here. Right, node 1, node 2, installing my GI home, installing my GI home here, which will start my ASM instance 1 and ASM instance 2, and also forms my ASM storage, which is a common across node 1 and node 2. And then we'll be installing my Oracle home on node 1, and I'll be installing my Oracle home on node 2, which will be forming my instances. Right now, I'll take one instance here. Let's take it CDB2. It will be installing my CDB instance 1 and my CDB instance 2. So we'll be getting two database instances. A client can connect to instance 1 or instance 2, and then they're trying to access the same common storage on the both instances. Right. So in pictorial view, if I draw that one, node 1, node 2. So got with the node 1 and got with the node 2, and assuming that I have disk 1, I have disk 2, I have disk 3, and I have disk 4, 5, and 6. Let's say these are my a list of OS disks, and then we have attached this disk to node 1. And then same thing, these disks are attached to node 2. So this is your Linux admin will do in the real-time world. He's gonna attach all these disks between node 1 and node 2. Right, once we attach it, so now we will download the GI software, and once we download the GI software, we'll install this GI home. So let's say we'll install the GI home here on node 1, and the moment I install GI home, I'll get my plus ASM instance 1. Right, and then I'll install the same GI home on node 2, I'll get plus ASM instance 2. Right, I'll be getting this ASM instance 1 running on node 1 and running on node 2, and these ASM instance running under the GI homes. And the moment I install my ASM, out of this disk, I can create my disk groups. So using these 3 disks, let's say I can take these 3 disks, and then I can take another 3 more disks, and then I can create as a plus data, and I'll create here a plus reco. With using this OS disk, whatever my Linux admin attached to these 2 servers, I have created data disk group and reco disk group. Whatever we are seeing it here, data and reco. These are the 2 disk group created with underlying disk, whatever attached to these 2 servers. And then I'm able to create this data disk group and the reco disk group only after installing this ASM. Without installing ASM, I will not be able to create this disk group, because that ASM instance or the grid home or the grid software is gonna provide that feature to create your ASM storage. Without that grid software, we'll not be able to create this storage. Right. Once that is done, then what we'll do? We're gonna install this Oracle home on node 1. We'll install this Oracle home. Right, so the same thing, we'll install it, we'll create a CDB instance 1 here, and then we'll create over here, which will be our instance 1 and instance 2. So while creation of this instance, this is the Oracle software we installed here, DB Home software we installed it. On top of the DB Home software, we'll be installing this database. And while creation of this database, it'll ask where I want to store my data files, where I want to store my archlogs. And during that time, I'm gonna create my data file should go to data, my archlog should go to reco. So if I create here my database, a CDB database will reside under this data disk group, and then my CDB database will reside under this reco disk group. So this database is nothing but your actual physical files, your system, sysocs, undo, user, temp, all those files will be reside under data, and all your archive log files, redo log files, control files, one copy will reside under your reco. So that is where your database instance, when you are in database instance or database, when you are creating it on top of this Oracle home, it will ask you where you want to store your data. You want to store it under file system or you want to store it under your local storage. That's where we give, okay, I want to store it under ASM. Right, and then now let's say in simple layman term understanding, your client one connects, and the moment client one connects, the client connection may go to node one or client connection may go to node 2. Based upon that load balancing, your scan will take care of that. Assuming that the client connection goes to node 1, the node 1 he goes, ideally the client will typically connect to instance, database instance. The moment he connect to database instance and he is doing some select statement of employee table, and since your database is under this data disk group and it has to go for database and then get that result and then give it back to that client. So this database instance has to go to this data disk group and then access it. So your ASM instance will act as a mediator to provide or grant that communication bridge between your database instance and your ASM storage. We have something called some background process ASM-MB, and those background process will communicate with each other. My database instance and ASM instance constantly communicating each other, and then because of that my database instance is able to read and write and understand my ASM storage. Because this is ASM storage, only ASM can read and write and understand anything on that storage. But how my database instance can read and write and understand that ASM storage? Because both ASM instance and database instance will be communicating each other with help of some background process called ASM-MB. And then because of that communication bridge, my database instance also can read and write and understand my ASM storage. All right, so that is the high level overview how a typical rack setup or installation looks like. Anyone has any questions so far?
Just one small question that RAC and those CDB, PDB concept are interrelated?
No, CDB, PDB is different topics. We have separate chapter for CDBs and PDBs. Even for standalone, you have CDB, PDB. Even for rack also, you have CDB, PDB. That is a totally different concept. All right. Now there's some questions here. Which home? Okay, let's say on which home cluster instance is started. Okay, again, it's already answered, right? Like it's all one home. Is say cluster home, ASM home, grid home, infrastructure home, all are under your any. You can call it. Some people will call it as a grid home. Some people will call it as a clusterware home. Some people will call it as ASM home. All are one and same. Everything will run under your clusterware home or the GI home. And only Oracle instance will run under Oracle software. That's it. Other than that, everything will run under your grid. And there's one more question: grid and Oracle software can be used. Yeah. So it's all your wish. You want to install grid. I want to install grid with a grid user. I want to install my Oracle with Oracle user. Or you can even go with both Oracle user. Or some people will go with Oraprod. Instead of Oracle, Oraprod. You go with Oraprod as the installation for both your grid home and your Oracle home. Or some people will go with again same. I don't want to go with Oraprod. Let's go with a grid for my Oracle. Or I will go with a grid user for my grid home or the for ASM home, and Oracle home go with Oraprod. So it's all left to you how you can install it. There's no hard and fast rule. You have to go with a different user or the same user. It's all like how you're going to configure. In my case here, all are configured with the Oracle user. My ASM or the grid, everything will be running with Oracle, and my database is also running with Oracle. And there are some databases here, Oraprod, running with prod user. Right, that is other understanding. Right, and then let's say any more questions here on the installation part or the how the fundamental things works when you talk about the clusterware or the grid?
Yeah, Malik?
Yeah.
Yeah, when installing the grid infrastructure and the Oracle database software and so on and so forth, how did we decide the user that can be used? Is it let's say the client that will give us, let's say, the requirement, or because
No,
here we can Oracle Grid and Oraprod, let's say
it is
that
all
is.
it's all internal to DBA. Client will never decide this. It's all like DBA you are going to decide.
Okay. Okay. And what is the advantages of using Grid for grid infrastructure, Oracle
If
for
you
the
if
Oracle
you go with the
DBA?
grid and Oracle two separate users, that is one of the security advantages. If you go with the grid and Oracle, so Oracle user can access only Oracle databases. They cannot access the grid. So if you go with a two separate user, one of the security best practices. If you go with the common user Oracle, again, it is anyone can access either Oracle or grid together.
Okay. Okay.
There's no standards. You can go with any one of that as per your requirement. Again, it is not
Okay.
client is going to decide, it is DBA we decide it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And further things here, remember, like, I'll just go to node 2. Right now I'm in node 2. I want to access my ASM storage. I want to access my ASM instance. Again, remember, in simple understanding, your GI is now having three important things. One is your ASM instance, and the other one is ASM storage, and the other one is your clusterware. So the moment you say grid infrastructure, which is a combination of three important things. One is ASM instance, one is ASM storage, and other one is your clusterware. Now let's say I want to access my ASM instance. So what you need to do, you just need to check, okay, my ASM instance, I want to access that. Who is the owner? Oracle. I just need to log into that Oracle, the owner of that. Right now, ASM is owned by Oracle. I log into that Oracle user. After that, I'm going to set the environment by running .vorenv, .space vorenv, and set your environment plus ASM2. And you can validate using env grep capital Ora, which will tell you ASM instance, ASM base, and ASM home. Once that is done, we're going to use SQL plus /s sys ASM. We'll run this SQL plus sys ASM to access or to connect to ASM instance. We use SQL plus /s ASM. That's gonna connect to my ASM instance, and you can do any activity. Like for example, check my ASM instance. There's so many activities you can perform on that. We have separate ASM class. We'll talk on that. That's way you can access your ASM instance. Right. Now you want to do some administration on your storage level. And then for this, again, same thing. ps-f grep smon, your ASM instance. You have to first log into that respective owner. Oracle is my ASM owner. Log into that, and again run this .vorenv plus ASM2, and then you're going to use ASM cmd-p. That's going to take you to your ASM command line. lsdg list this group. That's going to give you your ASM storage. So here you're going to use ASM cmd-p to connect your ASM storage.
that hyphen P option is required. I think the SMCMD will also work.
That is why I explained yesterday why we're using hyphen P. Hyphen P is path. Like, for example, right now I'm at plus. If I go into my CD, it will show you your path where you are. Right now, if I go into CDB, it's gonna go show you are into data CDB directory, PWD. That's gonna tell you which path you are into. If you don't use that hyphen P, that's not gonna show you path. It will just say ASMCMD. If I go to plus data, it'll just say again ASMCMD. If I go to my CDB, it'll just say ASM command line. It's not going to show you which path you are into. That's a full path it'll want to give you. That's the best practice. Again, if you use without use, doesn't matter. Both will work. But if you use, that's a good indication. It'll directly tell you which path you are into. Right. That is your ASM storage. The moment you install grid, with that grid software, you can manage your ASM instance by running SQL plus ASM. To manage your ASM storage by running ASM cmd-p and do any activity. And then a clusterware administrate or manage clusterware using CRS-CTL. Right, so the moment you install your grid software here, which will form a 2-node cluster. This is your 2-node cluster, it has formed here. So this cluster, you can manage it using your CRS-CTL command. Right, using the CRS-CTL command, you can manage it. Let's go back again. Right, SU Oracle. And again, in order to your SQL plus SSDB command to work, right? If I run this one, it will not work. SQL plus command not found. If I run this command, your command will not work. Your command not found. What that indicates, you are not set the environmental variable. If I do env pipeline capital or nothing is set. Because of that, these commands are not working. Make sure that you have to run this .env every time and set your ASM instance. The moment you set it, your command should work. ASM cmd-p will work, and your SQL plus SSDBA command also will work. The only thing is you have to set the proper environmental variable in order to access that. Right now, clusterware administration. We have CRS-CTL cluster control utility to administrate or manage your clusterware. Right, so there are so many commands. So if I do CRS-CTL-help, there are so many things you can do with CRS-CTL command. One simple thing I can do it, CRS-CTL stat resource -t -init or CRS-CTL check my cluster -all. I can run CRS-CTL check cluster all, one simple command. Again, as I said here, you can run so many commands with that. Right, I'm just running one command, CRS-CTL check cluster all, which will tell me node 1, my cluster ready service, my cluster synchronization service, my cluster event manager, all are online. My cluster ready service, that is on node 1, and node 2 also, all services are online. Right, this is one simple command. We'll explain in detail in our regular classes. And then if I do one more command, CRS-CTL check CRS on only node 1, it will tell you only on one node which you connected, either node 1 or node 2, the same services, cluster ready service, synchronization service, event manager, and then along with the HAS. We'll talk all these services in detail our regular classes. But this is one more command where you can check your cluster, what's the health. So I can check one more command, CRS-CTL stat resource -t -init. What are my cluster resource running on this node? What are those status? So with CRS-CTL stat resource -t -init, which will give me ASM, cluster interconnect, CRF, CRSD, CSSD, SSD monitor, CT/SSD, diskmon, and then your ACFS driver, EVMD, GIPCD, GPNPD, MDNSD, storage, all are like online. And again, this diskmon will be offline because we are not using a diskmon. It is only used in your Exadata servers, right? I can say this cluster node 2 is healthy, no issue at all. By just running this cluster resource, all the resources are online. The same thing if I go to node 1, CRSCTL, stat resource -t -init, CRSCTL, stat resource -t -init. So again, same thing, all the resources are online. And node 1 also, all the cluster resources are running fine. CRSCTL, check CRS. So all the cluster resources are online on node 1. Check cluster all. Same thing, whatever command we ran it on node 2. So node 1 details, also we're getting, node 2 details also we're getting. So it means my cluster is running healthy and then everything looks good. If any of the service is not running, we're going to go into that respective log and then take a look on that, what's the issue. So this actually what I'm trying to say, this CRSCTL command is the one which will be most after 99% used for my clusterware administration, right? Without that CRSCTL, you will not be able to manage your clusters, right? On top of that, DB home. This is about GI home, what we talked. GI home or the clusterware home or the cluster software, GI software, or the grid infrastructure home or the whatever you call it as, all are same. That GI home is combination of ASM instance, ASM storage, and clusterware. Whereas your DB home, and which is a combination of your DB instance.
Malik, before proceeding, just one small question. Means, can we do that ASM instance to like no mount open ASM instance?
ASM instance will be always no mount. It will never go to your mount state. Again,
Okay.
that is, as I said, the basics comes into picture here. Right? You have a shutdown, your database is shut down to no mount to mount, and mount to open. So you have this typical database startup sequence. From shutdown to no mount, in order to bring your database up, you are going to use your P file or
Yeah.
SP file. Any one thing you
No,
can
I'm
use it.
specifically asking for ASM instance. I never
I'm
used
coming to
ASM
that one. Like I'm explaining that one. If you want to take your database instance to no mount to mount, you need your control file. And you want to take your database to mount to open mode, you need your data files, and then you need your redo log files. And remember, your database has SP file, P file, your database has control file, your database has a data file and redo log files. But coming to ASM, ASM has only SP file. ASM does not have any control file, ASM does not have any data file, ASM does not have any redo log files. Right? Will be covered in detail during our actual ASM classes. But in simple answer, your ASM has only SP file. With that, what it indicates, your ASM can go from shutdown to no mount. Your ASM will never go to mount, or your ASM will never go to open state, because your ASM does not have any control file, your ASM does not have any data file.
Thank you.
Yes, Malik. I can see the two status, stable and observer in the CRS-ETL stats. The observer means we are hope to say we are good at offline or off.
No, it should be stable.
Okay, I can say observer mode. It is there.
Observer mode, again, there's a different story together. I can tell. This is observer mode only for your CT/SSD. CT/SSD stands for Cluster Time Synchronization Service Demand. Cluster Time Synchronization Service Demand. What it says, this is a service. Will say, boss, what's the time in node 1? What's the time in node 2? If the server time is already matching, node 1 also has right now 9:19 a.m. and node 2 also 9:19 a.m. Your time is sync. Okay, boss, like your both the servers are in sync. I don't have any job to do. I'll just go into my sleep mode. That's your observer. I'll just go into inactive mode. and this CTSSD will be never be used. That's your observer mode. Again, we'll talk more on that because your time is coming from something called centralized time zone. In any organization, time is coming from centralized time zone where all the servers are already in sync. Right now, let's say in simple example, I have node 1, node 2. This is my node 1 and node 2. In my node 1, it is assuming that 10 a.m. and node 2 also 10 a.m. This time is coming from your centralized server, time zone server. You have time zone server, and from this time zone server, this time is happening over here. Both the times are sync, and this CTSSD, we have this CTSSD here, and then CTSSD. It says, okay, CTSSD, this daemons will check what's the time on my server. Both are matching. Okay, both are matching. I don't have any job to do here. And then go into observer mode. Just keep quiet because time is matching already. In the other scenario, let's say you have time 10 a.m. here and you have time here 11 a.m. There's a 1 hour difference. And let's say client 1 connected and he returns some transaction here. And then this is 11 o'clock and client 2 connected to the server is saying 10 a.m. There's a data mismatch. There's a data discrepancy. So how it can be avoided? So your CTSSD comes into picture. The CTSSD comes into active mode, stable mode, and then it's gonna match these timings. Okay, what's the current time? And then it's gonna match. It's gonna set either it is 10 a.m. or here also 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. is the correct. It's gonna set 11 a.m. here and 11 a.m. here. Not at the host level, at the cluster level, it's gonna match the time, and your cluster will be in healthy state. That's the use of this CTSSD. Most of the times, 99%, your CTSSD will be observer mode because all the organization will be having a correct time zone across all the servers.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
All right. So that's the GI home what we're talking. Different your ASM instance, your ASM storage and clusterware, how you can access and how you can administrate that. When coming to Oracle home, it's just a DB instance. The DB instance, you're gonna see the same thing. Connect to your DB instance using SQL plus, not sysASM. We'll be using a sysDBA. For your database, it's a DBA. For ASM, it's a sysASM. And make sure that you have to set the proper environment before connecting to your database. So right now, let's take only one instance, like say Oracle, and I'll go with the CDB instance too. I'll just run .inv and then CDB2 instance 2. Okay, it is not set. Right now it is okay. One thing to observe here. When I run this one .inv, it is asking me provide the SID. If I give the CDB DB2, environmental is set. If I do env grep capital Vara, your CDB DB instance 2 Oracle base, Oracle home is all set. But whereas when I try to connect to my CDB2 instance, it says enter the Oracle home. For your CDB-DB, it did not ask. The moment I enter CDB-DB, automatically Oracle home is set. But for CDB2, it is not setting it. It is asking for Oracle home because the moment you run this command, it will check your Vara tab entry. In Vara tab entry, do I have this entry? If I have it, it will proceed further. Otherwise, it will ask you to enter the Oracle home. Quickly take a look on that etc Vara tab file. This is the file. And here you have CDB-DB instance, but CDB, you have CDB instance 1. Ideally, it should be CDB instance 2. And it is trying to find the CDB instance 2, but we don't have any entry for that. Because of that, it is asking for that, enter the Oracle home as well. So now if I change the CDB as an instance 2, now let's run the same command. su oracle.inv And now if I give the same CDB instance 2, right now when I give CDB instance 2 here, it asked for Oracle Home as well. But now if I give CDB instance 2, it will not ask. It will directly go to that Vora file, and it will set the environment. Right, connected. And I can do SQL plus /s sysdba. That's gonna connect to my database instance SQL command line, and then I can administrate. Right, that is fair enough. What is fair enough here? DB instance, I can connect to SQL plus sysdba, I can manage it. And then ASM instance, I can connect to SQL plus and I can manage it. That is fair enough. Assuming that assuming that you have node 1, node 2, node 3, node 4, node 5, node 6. You have a 6 node cluster. Then I want to do some administration, some maintenance on my database. I need to shut it down. Or I need to make some administration maintenance on ASM instance. I need to shut down that. What you need to do? Same thing, connect to this instance 1, shut down. Connect to instance 2, shut down. Connect to instance 3, shut down. Connect to instance 4, shut down. Instance 5, shut down. So that's a tedious job, right? If it is a 16 node cluster, you have to connect to all 16 servers and do that administration. That's become tedious job. And then how I can manage that one in case of clusterware? For that, Oracle has given of one more command. Administrate or manage ASM using SRVCTL. Same thing goes for administrate or manage DB or instance using SRVCTL. With help of SRVCTL, you no need to log into all the 16 servers and do that. With one SRVCTL, you can do that. SRVCTL status database -d CDB. You no need to go to all the 16 server and do ps-f grep passmon whether my instance is running or not. Just run the status. It's going to tell you your all the instances running on all the nodes or not. You no need to connect to all the 16 server to shut down your instances. Just do srvctl stop database, your database name. It's going to connect to all the servers and shut down all the instances across all the nodes. Right, so this is other handy commands when it comes to clusterware administration.
For the database, it's fine. Actually, if we have the 6 node rack, for example, in the fourth node, my ASM instance is down. So can we check like that, or should we check one by one?
Same thing command, right?
For the ASM also?
I'm going to show you that one. It's not database. There's a crctl check ASM.
Okay.
I'll do it on the node 1. Dot vora env plus ASM env grep capital vora crctl or your gonna srctl check ASM crctl check ASM. Give me a second. I'll get that command. Status ASM, sorry. All right, so let's go back. Give me a second. I can check it in a minute. So your CDBDB, your instance is now let's check it out on CDB instance 1, CDB instance 2, not running on node 1 and 2. And if you want to start it again, go back and then do start your
So in this case, CDB is the database and CDB 1 and 2 are instances.
Right. That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go here. Let it complete this one. It's going to take some time. Okay, any more questions so far?
Malik, if we did CRS CTL start HS, so what is difference between CRS CTL and SRV CTL?
Again, that's high level given here, right? Your CRS CTL is only for clusterware. SRV CTL is for your database or the database instances.
Okay.
Yeah, Malik, when you see the CRS will starts, we could see there is no database services offline are not showing, but still it is working with the SRV CTL.
Which
I think
one?
it's after CRS will start CRS, you can put it, go up. Yeah.
Start CRS.
No, CRS ETL starts CRS. Yeah. Scroll up. I think you have given already command.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Status I want to see. Yeah. Resources. TRS ETL starts resource -t. Yeah, this command. See, here is not showing any database registered here in the cluster services.
This is not. This is only for cluster resources. I'm not talking about any database. There's a different command you're going to run without init. So that's where you have to understand each command. This is init.
Okay. Okay.
What init means? List out only that resources of my cluster resources. It's only cluster resources. It is listing only cluster resources. That's the meaning of your init. If you remove this init and just run this entire command, that's going to give you everything, not only cluster, including your database, everything is going to give.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, let's do it over here. Plus ASM hyphen init, that's going to give you only that cluster resource. That's the meaning of init. If I remove that init, give me everything, including your databases here, RAC, RAC 12C, PrimeDB, VaraDB, Vara19C, and including your CDB, CDB, your ASM listeners, and your Recordis group, and your scan listener, your data disk group, and your local listener, your database listener, everything. That's your -t cluster resource. Give me everything. And I don't want everything. Give me only the cluster resource. That's hyphen init.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Let's go here.
If you have pluggable, if you have pluggable, it's going to show the same thing.
Okay, come again.
If you have pluggable, it's going to show the same thing.
Pluggable.
Yeah. Using that
Again,
commands.
Doesn't matter, right? You don't go into database level. Your database may be CDB, PDB, normal database, or 11G, 12C, 19C. It is inside database. Outside at cluster level, doesn't matter. It's just a DB. Right. So somebody asked about ASM instance, right? You do SRCTL status ASM. That'll also give me which database is running, which ASM instance are running, and which is not running on that particular node. And then go ahead and then take a necessary action on that. But if it is not running on node 1, go ahead and then start it. Right. So in the for SRCTL, again, if you observe the same command here, we do SRCTL status database, but here we do SRCTL status ASM direct command, because we are not, your ASM is not a database. We are not adding that keyword database. That's the difference between your SRCTL on ASM instance, SRCTL on database instance. Otherwise, it's remains same. Right. Right. Any questions so far on the high level overview, how the RAC or the clusterware installation looks, or looks or like works?
Malik, this one, I think before we used to have in the cluster where we used to have a multiple log files to scan, right? For CRS, for different log file, for CSSD, for different log file and all. Post 12C or 19C, it has come as a centralized log file. So if any issues comes, we need to check one log file only, right?
No. Before 12C, let's go back here again. CRSCTL stat resource -t -init. We have so many resources here. ASM is a resource, cluster interconnect as a resource, CRF as a resource, CRSD as a resource, CTSSD as a resource, and Diskmon as a resource, EVMD as a resource, GIPD, GIPCD. All are the cluster resources. If any one of these resources is down, your cluster will not be up and running. Your database instance will be not running. Your ASM will not be not running.
Correct.
So in 12C, all these logs are in different location. In 12C onwards, what they made it, everything they kept into one single location. But log files are again different. If I can just check for this one, I can use locate this command .trc gipcd.trc. That's going to give me the exact location where it is. Or what you can do, this is, let's directly go here and then do ls-ltr. They're going to give all the locations of your files. Right now I can say OCSSD, GIPCD, CRSD, and OHSD, and your EVMD, and your GPNPD, and scroll further up, your EVMD logger. All are like into a centralized location.
Okay,
This
so
is the correct location.
location is one, the files are still different.
Right. So now let's say many people will more often get confused on how to troubleshoot, and not necessarily for database. Like let's say DB instance troubleshooting, or listener, or your scan, or your ASM, anything. Like, you have to understand what you are trying to troubleshoot. My ASM is not starting, I want to troubleshoot. My scan is not starting, I want to troubleshoot. My listener is not starting, I want to troubleshoot. My DB instance is not starting, I want to troubleshoot. Or my cluster or CRS cluster resource are not starting, need to troubleshoot. Right? I need to do all this. Like, you no need to remember all the things to troubleshoot or things. Like, I always follow the basic fundamental rule. Your database instance is not starting, listener is not starting, scan listener is not starting, my ASM instance is not starting, my cluster resource, like your whatever these resources we talked here, any of these resources not starting, your GIPCD, MDNST, storage, CRF, CRSD. My underlying fundamental ground rule is I need to first go to that respective log file, check the log file, what is the error message. If you go to the log file and check the error message, and you will understand the issue, and then you will get to know what will be the root cause and what's the fix. And now I want to check for the log location. I don't have a feasibility to remember all of them. So what I can do, simply I'll go into my Oracle base. Let's go to Oracle base first. Once you go into Oracle base, this is your Oracle base, and do ls-ltr. And inside Oracle base, you have diag location. Go into diag location. This is your diag. Inside that diag, and what you are trying to troubleshoot. I want to troubleshoot my DB instance. Database. Database is nothing but RDBMS. Go into RDBMS. Inside that, which database you want to troubleshoot? Inside that RDBMS, I have so many databases. I want to troubleshoot my CDBDB or CDB database. Inside that, your instance name. Inside that, you have your trace, and inside that trace, you have this alert log and so many other things. So this is how you need to navigate. Okay, I want to troubleshoot my database instance. I need to go to diag, then RDBMS. I can go back now. Now I don't want to troubleshoot my database. I want to troubleshoot what? I want to troubleshoot my ASM. Let's go to ASM instance. And inside that your plus ASM. And inside that your plus ASM instance 1. And inside that you have all the trace and other things you can troubleshoot over there. Go ahead and check the log. That is your ASM log. Right? Now you want to troubleshoot listener. So again, go back to the same location. I'll go back to the same diag location. And then now I want to troubleshoot my listeners. Go to that respective listener directory, TNS listener, and which listener on node 1, I want to troubleshoot. Which listener you want to troubleshoot? You want to troubleshoot a database specific listener, or your scan listener, or your ASMNet listener, or your ASM listener. So all the listeners, I'll just take one database specific listener, RAC C database listener, and inside that I can trace. Right. So this is all your listener specific. Again, which listener you can go? This is one database specific. I can say your DB specific. And then you want to specific like scan listener. Let's go with instead of database specific, you can go to that respective scan one. Right, you want to troubleshoot now a cluster one. So now again go back to the same diag location. Your cluster is a CRS. I'll go into CRS, cluster ready service. And inside that again node, and inside that CRS, and inside that a trace. And this is the same location where we saw that file. In this particular file, which resource you want to troubleshoot, because cluster resources are too many. If I go back here, CRSETL stat resource -t-init. So which resource is not starting? Your MD&SD is not starting. And then go into that location. This is my location. And then LL, I can check for that particular log file. So I can directly go into that MD&SD log file. I can check it out. Or my GIPCD is not starting. And go into that one and open GIPCD log file and then look for that. If you're able to identify the error message, you'll understand the root cause and then you can apply the fix. Right, so that is a simple way to understand the log location and then how we can troubleshoot further. Again, for the scan also same thing. Let's go to your listener one and then node, and inside that which scan, like scan 1 is not starting, scan 2 is not starting, scan 3 is not starting. Go into that and then take a trace by location, and inside that you have that scan 3 log, and then you can troubleshoot. Right, so that's all centralized. You can just go to navigate to diag and then navigate to the respective trace file. All right. Any questions or anyone has so far at high level what we covered on the RAC overview architecture, how it looks. And again, if I go further deep dive, there'll be too much. I'm not going to take it in further. Like we have node IPs and interconnect or private IPs, public IPs. And if I check it over here, we have the node 1 and node 2. Each has instance, ASM instance 1, ASM instance 2, database instance 1, database instance 2. Each node has a public IP, and that public IP is nothing but your physical IP. And then each node has a VIP. Again, in simple words, at high level, if I want to cover in internet, you have public network and then private network. So any internet or any IPs are accessible over the internet or outside of your domain, those are like public network. And any IP is accessible only within your domain, those are like private. So in public and private, we have physical IPs and VIPs. Same thing goes for your private network also, the same thing. We have VIPs. Again, these are like your understanding. Again, networking is a very vast thing, but what I'm trying to say, you have public network and the private network. The network where you have a internet access where you can able to access it outside of your domain, that's a public one. Where you cannot access it, that's a private one within your organization or within your domain. In the public network and in private network, we have physical IPs and the VIPs. Right, only two things. And in case of this node 1 and node 2, what we are going to set up 2 node rack, what we are trying to use. Right, and then okay, again, physical IPs, VIPs, physical IPs and VIPs. So this physical IPs, nothing but we call it as a public IPs. And then this one, private IPs. The physical IPs, whatever the physical IP in public network, we call it the public IPs. Whatever the physical IPs in the private network, we call it the private IPs. So now node 1, what we're using here, node1 dot local domain.com. And the same thing for node 2. So what all IPs we're using it here? So node 1, node 2, 2 host names, and here we'll be using a public IP. Node 1 public IP, node 2 public IP. So make it simple. I'll put it over here. So I'm going to use a public IP, like I'll just do 192.168.1.101. Give me a second, I'll just make it simple. Node 2. Node 2. Node 2. Right. So node 1, that's my a public IP. And node 2, again the public IP. Let's put it over here. Give me a second. So node 2, remove this one, okay. Right now I want to configure 2 node rack setup, node 1 and node 2. Node 1, I'm going to assign public IP. I'm going to assign public IP for both the nodes. And then I'm going to assign both the node of VIPs, like node 1 hyphen VIP.
VIP is virtual IP, right?
Right. 3. Right. This is my node 1 virtual IP on the public network, because you are seeing the same subnet over here. And my node 2 This is my node 2, a public IP. Node 1 VIP, node 2 VIP, and if you observe, the IPs are on the same CIDR or the subnet. And now, node 1, we got 4 IPs. Now, we will get one more IP for the node 1, a private IP. Just a private. And this one is on the different subnet. Let's go with 1. Node 2, private IP. Right, like what I'm trying to say here, I need minimum 3 IPs for my node 1. I need minimum 3 more IPs for my node 2 in order to do a 2-node rack setup. And what we observed here, public network and private network. And in the public network also you have physical IPs and VIPs. In private network also you have physical IPs and VIPs. And what we used are public IPs for node 1 and node 2. And we use the VIPs for node 1 and node 2. And all are in the same public network. We use 2 IPs, public IPs or the physical IPs for node 1 and 2. We used 2 VIPs in the public network for both node 1 and node 2. And we used 2 private IPs. Again, those are like a physical IP. So instead of public IP, we call it as a private IP here. Whatever we are saying here, private. Right? So these are your private IPs. And again, these are like physical IPs. Right? What is mean by physical IP? So I'm talking about here physical IP, physical IP. And what is mean by VIP? Physical IP is one where your actual interface is assigned, where your actual service is running on that, configured with that particular IP. So any interface you assign it, that will become your physical IP. If you don't assign any interface and just to tag or VLAN that particular IPs, that's your VIP. We'll talk more on that in our regular classes, how we can identify VIPs and physical IPs. But for now, we use 2 public IPs in the public network. Those are like physical IPs tagged to interface. And we use 2 VIPs, again, same in the public network. And those will not be having any interface. Those will be just lagging or hanging in the same public network. And we use 2 private IPs. And again, those are like physical IPs. Physical IP in the sense attached to any interface or the NIC card of that particular server. Right, so if we get a 3 plus 3 is 6 IPs, your 2 nodes are ready. Node 1 is ready and node 2 is ready. And then we have something called scan.
Correct.
Right.
So the scan IP will also be added, right?
That's what I'm explaining now. So I'm talking about only nodes. Right now, our nodes are ready. If I have these 3 IPs for node 1, 3 IPs for node 2, my node is ready. So we're good. We go proceed with the installation. But at the time of installation, it will ask for the scan IPs. So you can go with the 1 or 2 or 3 based upon how many scan IPs you have it. You can go with that 1 or 2 or 3. So ideally default, a 3 is a default one. That's the best recommendations. So we're going to get 3 IPs. What are those 3 IPs? In the public network, we're going to get 3 VIPs. scan.localdomain.com. So this scan will be having again same your public IPs. Right? Again, I'm just giving it as a public IP. It doesn't mean that, let's say, instead of public IP, VIP.
Malik sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
what is the relevance of each of these IPs? There should be some particular type of communication this is handling, right?
Yes.
So you'll be covering that shortly?
Not now. It will be part of our actual class.
Okay.
Right. So let's go with 3, or else leave it later. We can change it. The scan also comes under this VIP. So that VIP, again, this is public IP in a sense, not the physical one we are talking about here, or else I can make a complete change itself. Make it as a VIP. VIP. So instead of VIP, you can call it as a public VIP. Right, so I can call it as a public VIP and VIP both are same because that is under my public network. Right, we all are under 1.series, 1.series, 1.series. And coming to scan also, whatever the scan.localdomain.com, I'm going to continue with the same public VIP. 1, 2, 3. So default is recommended to have 3 scan. Even you can go with a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Everything works fine. But there's a reason behind why we recommended to go with a 3, or the default is 3. We'll discuss more in our regular classes. Right, so that is your overall requirement. In order to do this 2-node rack setup, you should have node 1 and node 2. You should have 2 servers, and both the servers should have public physical IP 2 and 2 VIP for this node, and 2 private IPs. Again, those are physical IPs attached to an interface, and we need a 3 VIPs to support your scan. Totally, we need a 9 IPs. With the 9 IPs, you should be able to set up your 2-node rack setup. Right, this is a bare minimal requirement. 9 IPs are main minimal. Like if you're going with a scan as a 3, like these 3 are mandatory on node 1, and node 2, 3 IPs are mandatory. But for scan, if you go with the 1, 3 plus 3 plus 1, 7 are needed. If you go with a scan 2 IPs, 3 plus 3 plus 2, 8 are mandatory. If you go with the 3 as a scan IPs, if you need 3 plus 3 plus 3, 9 are mandatory. These are bare minimal requirement. And apart from that, people used to have MGMT IP, management IP. And people used to have IPM CI IP. IPM CI IP. So these are like extra. And then you can say agent IP. Right, so especially when you go into your Oracle Exadata box, and you can see this management IP, you can see this IPM CI IP and agent IP. Again, these are like extra out of the box, not mandatory for your installation. Right, what is mandatory for installation? For administration, 3 IPs for node 1, 3 IPs for node 2, and followed by your scan. It may be 1, 2, 3 based upon your need. Even you can go with the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, so if you go with any Exadata server and see, these all IPs are getting into picture. But for normal on-premises local rack cluster, you don't see it. All right. All right, let's wrap it up for today. Not to take any much time. Provided anyone has any questions further on this course curriculum or the topic, whatever we covered so far.
Can you please copy the note to the chat board, please?
Note to the?
Yeah, this note. Can you just copy it to the chat?
Charts.
Yeah, copy it to the chat.
No, it will be there already. If you are part of the course, and it will be already uploaded. Yesterday's session also uploaded, and then you might have seen the recordings. And if I can go here, right? This is my yesterday's demo session, and this is my the notepad, whatever I use. That's how I used to do it for my course. I'll teach it, whatever the command, whatever the notes, I'm gonna type it on my notepad, along with the whatever this command we executed, I'll just copy everything and then attach it along with the recordings here. You can watch the recordings and at the same time you can get the command from the notepad. Both will be available in our Google Drive. I'm going to cover this probably when we start next week actual class. I'm going to go through that, what all this Google Drive, how to access that. That might be the confusion who are already registered. You might not be aware of how to access this Google Drive links. That will be covered in our actual classes in the next weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Malik. Yeah. So in the laptop, it's while setting the lab. So our laptop IP configuration is network adapters is different IP. So whatever you configure the lab setup predefined VMs, those having the different IPs, right? How it will be?
We'll be covering that one. We'll be explaining all of them in our actual class.
Okay.
Yeah, Malik, one doubt.
Yeah.
The video recording you will be sharing, right? That will have some good quality, right? Like around like some 20 MB or like that.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no, what
Because
is good?
I mean, like the video quality, recorded video quality, like it is like HD or like that.
Yeah, it's HD on.
Okay. Okay. Why? Because I see it like 300 MB for 2 hours of class.
That's
That,
a compressed one.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Let's wrap it up. If no one has question around this, we'll connect in our regular classes by next week. All right, guys. Have a nice day. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, Malik. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.